morning we're kind of hoping that you at home will relive some memories, have a laugh, maybe shed a tear or two, and even spot the odd spoof as we delve into Santa's sack of Ryan Show memories for one more time. So let's start with the topic that Gerry was always keen to discuss.
Gerry, how's the farm?
Very good, sir. How are you?
Not too bad at all.
Okay,
Gerry,
what have you got for us?
I'm ringing you about you call it your house, your father's. I call them jubblies, Gerry.
The Jubblies, the lovely Jubblies.
The lovely jubblies.
Yep.
We used to go to, excuse me, we used to go swimming lessons when we were in primary school. I suppose maybe 12 or 13 near the end of it. And there was one girl, she happened to be the largest girl in the swimming pool. Now, I don't mean fat now, like, if that's politically correct, but large, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
She made a mistake putting on her swimsuit one day in the swimming pool, and I left one jubbly sticking out to the side.
Much to the delight of the assembled young boys.
Much to the delight, Gerry. You have no idea.
In fact, general hysteria, I would imagine.
Absolutely. The whole pool went mad, and the poor girl didn't know a thing. And she was doing her front crawl up and down the pool. Well, Gerry, you never seen as many lads to learn how to breathe underwater on their back. It was unbelievable. Gerry, I remember doing the full length of the pool
Underwater,
looking upwards with my eyes open and the chlorine burning the eyes out of me.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Was that the first breast that you'd ever seen?
Oh, it had to have been, yeah.
Yeah.
It had to have been.
It's funny how those moments remain with a young man for his entire life.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, what can I say except a great story and well told, and just goes to show the male psyche. Fellas will do anything, including swimming upside down underwater with their eyes burning from chlorine to see any portion of a naked woman.
That's basically it, Gerry.
And it means you're normal, Peter. Congratulations.
Much,
good morning. Well, when was your first occasion? 1857-15922. Rosaline, good morning.
Good morning, Gerry. I'm on to you again.
How are you?
Right. Well, mine wasn't as public, but it was public as Judas was, thanks be to God.
What happened?
I was in a hospital bed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was put into this all-male ward because they had no room left in the female ward.
Okay.
And I was shoved into a corner, kind of a make-up bed kind of type of thing, with no screens or anything like that.
Very compromising.
Oh, for God's sake, it was an experience never to be repeated. But however, I bent down. I didn't realise that my nightgown was so low. Well, it wasn't low, really, until you do something out of the ordinary, and then the strap would come down when I bent down on the floor to pick up something. And I didn't realise that my boob on my right-hand side had come out completely, right?
Until you saw fellas who'd had their legs amputated hopping around the room.
This was like this for over an hour.
Over an hour?
Well, over an hour, because
Jehovah.
there was nobody bothering to come. There was no reason for a nurse or anything to come in or out at this particular time. Like, it was lunch hour and dinners were being served and what have you. So, until the nurse decided to do her checks. And she couldn't understand why all the men's blood pressures was soaring. And one of the men said, well, he says, he was a man up from the country. He says, by God, he says, nurse, he says, if I had known, he says, that we had free striptease, he says, in this hospital, he says, I would have been in here, he says, long before now.
Rosaline, you could have been responsible for the deaths of several of them.
That's what the nurse told me.
You could have killed them.
And she said, what in the name of God are you talking about? Oh, he says, I have a grand bird's eye view from here, he says, look, well, the nurse nearly died. Over she came to me, Rosalie, she said, you know that you're half naked in the bed? I said, what are you talking about? Well, when I looked there, I nearly died.
Now, you're sure you weren't doing that deliberately?
No, I was not, Gerry.
Well, you're a bit of a notice box.
I tell you, if you'd have seen the man that was in that ward...
You wouldn't have been doing it deliberately. But sure, God loved them, at least they got something. You might have helped them on their road to recovery.
I may have. It was just a short story, but it was a very funny thing at the time.
And well told too, Rosaline. Good morning and God bless.
Good morning, Gerry. Bye-bye.
In the early days of the Ryan Show, Gerry was an eyewitness to a radical new brain surgery technique and watched as a Ryan Show listener had a small section of his brain removed, washed and reinserted live on the radio.
Cranial saw. We are taking a cranial saw, which I will now be endeavouring. Thank you. Sterilise, please. Thank you. This is the cranial saw, which we are cutting through the skull.
How big will the hole?
In fact, this will be a circular hole.
Now, what is that
we
white
are.
substance that's coming out
The
there?
white
now?
substance is something called the permasic. Right. Now, okay.
So the
This is
permiasic is
permiasic, which leaks from the inside of the skull.
correct.
And now we have now made, as you can see, if you wish to look over here,
Mm-hmm.
we have made a small incision,
And
1/8 of an inch in diameter.
yes. And here now I can see this about 1/8 of an inch, and it is what I'm looking directly at down through the hole here. What is
If
that?
you look through this glass, which is basically it's a large glass, if you look in here, you can see the inside of the skull. Can you see that?
Yes.
Right. What we're seeing there is the cranial cavity.
Mm-hmm.
Now I will need to make a further incision into the cranial cavity through the medulla cortex.
Mm-hmm.
So if I could have that, please. Thank you. Could I have a
And what's the instrument that you're using there?
I'm just taking. This is the cranial drill. In fact, there are two.
I see.
Now,
Now you're going down into what you've
Yeah.
termed as the cranial cavity.
that's right, and into the.
Yes. Now, why are we? Why?
cortex.
Just if it's possible to interrupt you for just one moment. Why isn't it bleeding all over the place?
Swab, please, no, swab.
There doesn't seem to be very much blood, Mr. Dungan. Why is that?
No, the only time we would have a lot of blood would be if there was a hemorrhage. That sometimes occasionally happens as well. Thank you.
Now,
What would happen in that case, we would get what initially is called a spout swab, but there would be a large amount of blood coming out if there
Yeah.
was a hemorrhage. And we would then get a craniofunnel, as it's called. There's one there, a nurse which is showing craniofunnel.
yeah, which to all intents and purposes
It's
looks like a
small-
very miniature,
it's a miniature
funnel.
Into this we would pour something which is basically, it's a compound of pure corn flour
I
and
see.
paprika. Now the
Yeah.
corn flour would in fact act on the blood and would stop the bleeding from taking place. The paprika would act as something which would cleanse out and
Right.
stop the lobo.
So you'd make a sort of a type of cranial custard, in
something
effect.
which would act in that effect and which
Yeah.
would in fact stop the bleeding.
All right, now.
However, we don't have that problem at the moment. If you look in here,
Yep.
you shall see through this small hole. Forceps, please. Thank you. Now, if you can see there, you're actually seeing the live brain functioning.
It's incredible.
Now, what we are endeavouring to do in Mr. Cleary's case is that we are going to have to remove a small portion close to the medulla of his brain. We are going to take this out. So, I am now taking. Thank you.
Now you're going to
The
permanently
small-
remove this.
Damn, scissors, another scissors. Please.
This is what happened there.
It just fell. And,
Oh, I see. But it fell onto his. It fell in onto. Will that not hurt him now? That
no,
fell on him.
it's, he really won't feel anything. I'm going to take the small scissors. As you can see, this is such complex and close work that I need swab, please.
What is that you're putting up to your eye now? It looks like a microscope.
This is microscope because what I am cutting here is a very tiny incision, and therefore I don't have any room for
Yes,
making
right.
any mistakes.
Right.
So I am now cutting close to the
Yes.
medulla, and
Yeah.
now I am cutting right around there. I am now
Yeah.
going to remove part of the medulla. Forceps, please.
Now, what is the medulla? What does it do in the brain?
Well, in this case, the medulla is in fact causing the problem that Mr.
Cleary
is having. He has been having very severe headaches. We are hoping there are two possibilities here. One is that we would have to remove this part of the brain, which would obviously incapacitate him. I'm hoping that when I take this out, that we will place this in a lobo-hydrocolic sterilizer and that we will then be able to reinsert it. This is where we reinsert it. We've got to put it right back in. I'm going to have to make a slightly larger incision here. There sometimes is a problem when we are reinserting this part. Forceps. Thank you.
Now, that device, which to all intents and purposes looks like a soldering iron that you've got there, what's that going to be used for?
This is a laser
Yeah.
soldering iron, basically. It's a laser iron which we will now, having put this piece back through the cranium and having put it back in the medulla, back into the brain, we will now need to solder this together. So that's what I am doing. This is basically what is happening. We are soldering or resoldering the nerve endings.
What's the smoke?
Well, that's obviously just the heat Fortunately, if this man were conscious, he would obviously be in great pain. What he will have when he wakes up is one hell of a headache, but hopefully the job will have been done at that stage.
Now, to be perfectly honest, Mr. Duncan, I mean, what you're just pointing that laser, basically.
I'm basically pointing this at the nerve ends of the medulla which we have removed. I am now reattaching that part of the brain to the brain. It has been put through this sterilizer, which will have done away, hopefully, with the infection which was causing him.
Why are Mr. Cleary's ears shaking?
Well, this is obviously a brain reaction. He doesn't feel anything, but it obviously has an effect because we are putting this back right onto nerve endings, all of the nerves in his body, for example.
And now his whole body is actually shaking.
That is
now.
right, and this will cause obviously effects on various parts of his anatomy. And
now his hand, look, his hand.
That is correct.
Is that actually anything to worry about now?
Nurse, forceps. Thank you.
Is that anything? What do you mean now? He's actually the whole body is vibrating now.
This is basically.
This is par for the course. This is normal.
Quite normal for what we are doing here.
Now his legs are going.
That's correct. Can you just hold that, nurse? Can you hold his legs? Damn it! Did you tie his legs, nurse?
Is this normal? Would it be normal?
This would be quite normal.
Yeah, quite normal that you're tying his legs down now. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. He seems to be calming now.
We have finished, in fact, with the nerve endings. They have now been reconnected. Swab, please, nurse.
Okay.
Swab. Now, what we are going to do here is one of the most interesting things. I am obviously not going to reinsert the piece of skull which I took out permanently because I will need to check this with the swab. I will need to check this in approximately 10 days. So what I'm going to do is I've got 2 screws here, which I'm going to take this small piece of plastic covering which I'm going to put onto his skull. The piece of skull which we removed is now being preserved. I'm now going to screw 2 screws into this piece of skull, which I'm going to reinsert into this plasticized skull.
Okay.
Then, when we check in 10 days that everything is working fine, we will then put the original piece of skull back into his head.
This is a kind of a temporary cover then, as it were.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to put 2 miniature screws in.
Right.
Okay. And damn it. It's not working. Can you give me another screw, nurse?
What's happened there?
Just one of these screws seems to have twisted.
Okay, right. Okay.
That seems
that's
to...
it.
Now, what we've
now,
got...
what's that? What's the other object there now?
Well, basically this
I think it looks like a hairdryer.
Well, this is basically... We are now going to have to dry underneath this to ensure that there, in fact, is no infection getting into the brain. And we're going to have to dry it out. It's basically a very high-powered laser dryer, which is... drying the cranial cavity.
That's burning his head, is it?
Well, it is burning his hair, and that is why, as you will see, we have made removal of some hair. There will obviously be singeing to the hair, but this is probably quite a small
in fact, it's burned nearly all his hair off, really, hasn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, would Mr. Cleary...
This will regrow within probably 2 weeks.
I see. But Mr. Cleary would be aware of that, would he, that this was going to happen to him? Because now he's now...
I would have explained this to him before he came down to the theatre. Now, that has dried out, basically, all of the cranial cavity, and the only thing remaining to do, which the nurses will do now, will be to stitch up over this small insertion of plasticized cranium that I have made, and then we will be taking him back to intensive care. So we won't know for approximately 6 to 7 days how successful this has been. Initially, there will be a 2-day period where he will be extremely sick. After that, we will then have a period of another 2 days where he will still suffer from, needless to say, from severe headaches. But after that, we're going to have to just see how things have gone.
Very suspicious sounds there. I think that laser dryer sounded a bit like a 1200 watt hairdryer belonging to part-time broadcaster